He didn't just win, he rewrote the rules. But every empire built on chaos eventually collapses under it. Behind the gold-plated confidence, the cracks had already begun to show. Before the fall came the illusion of greatness, because Donald J. Trump wasn't just a politician, he was a brand. His name meant power, fear, and control. He sold himself as the ultimate outsider, the billionaire who told it like it is, the man who would drain the swamp and make America great again. In 2016, that message hit like lightning. Millions of frustrated Americans, tired of politics as usual, saw Trump as the wrecking ball they'd been waiting for. Loud, unapologetic, unpredictable, everything the system wasn't, and that made him unstoppable. The crowds weren't just supporters anymore, they were his audience. He turned rallies into entertainment, insults into strategy, and lies into headlines. Every outrage made him stronger, because to his followers every attack proved he was one of them. The media fed him the spotlight, and he fed them chaos. For a time, it felt like the Trump show would never end. But shows built on spectacle always end. The lights don't stay on forever. Behind the chants and the flags, something else was growing. Not a movement, a myth. Not leadership, worship. A belief that Trump was untouchable, that the rules no longer applied, that the truth was whatever he said. And when a man starts believing he's above the law, the fall isn't far behind. Power built on outrage burns itself out. The louder he shouted to prove his strength, the more his power began to crack, and soon the world would see it. When power starts to crumble, it doesn't whisper, it collapses. And for Trump, the very power that built him was about to destroy him. He built his power on chaos, and chaos was coming to collect. Every empire crumbles from within. Trump's was no different, though he refused to see it. At first, it looked unstoppable. The rallies, the headlines, the chaos on every screen. For a moment, it felt like he'd beaten the system itself. But behind the curtain of strength and swagger, the machinery was already grinding itself to dust. The scandals didn't explode overnight. They came in waves, small at first, then louder, then deafening. The Russia investigation, the hush money payments, the obstruction claims, each one chipped away at the myth of invincibility he had built. Piece by piece, the armor started to crack. Inside the White House, loyalty became a currency, and betrayal a language. Aides leaked secrets, allies turned witnesses. Each day brought a new headline, and another denial. Witch hunt, he shouted. Fake news, he declared. Yet the louder he screamed, the clearer the cracks became. The Mueller investigation wasn't just about law. It was about legitimacy, and legitimacy was the one thing Trump could never fake. The presidency that was supposed to make him untouchable had made him vulnerable instead. Behind closed doors, Trump's rage became legendary. The sudden firings, the late-night phone calls, the endless demands for loyalty, what once looked like strength was starting to look like panic. Because Trump couldn't control the story anymore, he had built his brand on dominance. But dominance built on fear doesn't last. The walls around him weren't closing in slowly. They were collapsing all at once. Allies distanced themselves. Ratings fell. Headlines grew darker by the week. Even those who once defended him began whispering what no one dared say out loud. Maybe the Trump era was ending. Low heartbeat returns, bass hum rising. He'd fought the press, the courts, even his own people. But there was one enemy he couldn't outshout. The truth, the illusion was breaking. The empire was cracking. Deep down he knew, the real reckoning hadn't even begun. Because when a man builds his world on denial, reality always finds a way to break through. Power never disappears overnight, it unravels, thread by thread. And for Donald Trump, that unraveling began the moment reality stopped obeying him. The headlines grew darker, the scandals louder, and the reckoning closer. The chaos that once fueled him was now closing in. Investigations tightened, subpoenas piled up, and loyalty, once his favorite weapon, began to fade. Then came impeachment, not once but twice. The ultimate humiliation for a man who built his empire on dominance. Every hearing, every witness, every televised moment stripped away another layer of invincibility. He wasn't the disruptor anymore, he was the accused. Behind the cameras, frustration turned to fury. Every tweet became a weapon, every rally a desperate performance. He raged against the deep state, cursed his enemies, and demanded loyalty from those who had none left. But anger can't erase reality. It only amplifies it. The world watched a man at war with gravity. The higher he'd climbed, the harder the fall became. And when the 2020 election arrived, Trump wasn't fighting for victory anymore. He was fighting for survival. He'd once mocked losers. Now he was becoming one. He called it rigged, stolen, fake. But even his closest allies were starting to move on, because deep down everyone around him knew the walls had finally caved in. What followed wasn't just denial, it was desperation. Late-night calls, wild conspiracies, a desperate command to fight like hell. It wasn't politics anymore. It was panic, playing out in real time. And then came the moment that would define it all. January 6th. The day when words turned into action, and chaos became reality. The crowd he once controlled stopped listening, and started acting. The world watched in disbelief as the symbol of American democracy was torn apart in his name. That moment changed everything. The image of strength was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. For the first time, Trump wasn't dictating the story. The story was dictating him. He had built his empire on division, but division couldn't save him now. His legacy, once gold and loud, was now fractured and fragile, and as the smoke cleared, one truth remained. The fall had begun. When the cameras dimmed, the silence hit harder than any scandal ever could. For the first time in years, Donald Trump wasn't at the center of the stage. He was outside looking in. The tweets stopped. The rallies emptied, and the man who once commanded millions was left shouting into an echo chamber of loyalists and ghosts. He built his empire on noise, and now there was nothing left but the echo of his own voice. The investigations didn't end when he left office. They multiplied. Each indictment, each subpoena, each leaked testimony pulled him deeper into the quicksand of accountability. For a man who had always defined himself by power, losing control wasn't just painful. It was unthinkable. Behind closed doors, allies turned cautious, then silent. Donors hesitated. Advisors disappeared. Even Fox News, once his loudest megaphone, began to pull away. He lashed out at everyone, prosecutors, judges, former aides, even his own supporters if they dared to move on. Every post became an attack, every appearance a performance. But the world wasn't listening anymore. He launched a comeback, not out of hope, but out of survival. Because for Trump, politics was never about service. It was about protection. The presidency had been his armor, and now, stripped of it, every charge, every trial, every headline cut deeper than the last. He stood before cameras again, trying to summon the same fire. But the eyes were different now. The crowd still cheered. But the energy was hollow. Even his rage felt rehearsed. And as the walls of justice closed in, one truth became unavoidable. Trump was no longer the storm. He was standing in the aftermath. He built his empire on fear. But fear only works when people still believe, and now, they don't. History has a way of catching up, even with those who once outran it. For years, Trump defied every prediction, every scandal, every law of political gravity. But time has a patience chaos never does. One by one, the myths began to fade. The billionaire image, the outsider legend, the illusion of invincibility, all stripped away, until only the man was left. He'd spent decades rewriting his own story, convincing millions that truth was whatever he said it was. But truth doesn't negotiate. It waits, and when it arrives, it takes everything built on the lie. The trials came, the verdicts followed, and for the first time, the man who once claimed to be above the law stood beneath it. In courtrooms where cameras were banned, silence replaced spectacle. No crowd, no chance. Just the sound of justice moving at its own pace. He still posted, still blamed, still performed, but the world had moved on. And that, more than any sentence, was the real punishment. The empire he built on chaos had finally met its quiet end. Because history doesn't remember noise, it remembers consequence. And every empire built on chaos eventually pays its debt to order. Power fades, but legacy is what remains when the noise is gone. And Trump's legacy won't be measured by what he built, but by what his fall revealed. When the show ended, the spotlight didn't move on. It went dark.